fresh attacks on Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas this week. The left is unrelenting in its effort to take down this great American justice on the United States Supreme Court. For more on this, I want to bring in Mark Paoletta, as we so often do. Mark is a senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America and the co-editor of the book, Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in His Own Words. Mark, good to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
It seems, it's like every month or so we've got another one of these. What is it this time, Mark? What is the left doing?
As bad as it's been and how many times they attacked Justice Thomas, this one may be the worst of all time. This was a recent chart by Fix the Court, a big-time left-wing funded group that touts themselves as a nonpartisan group, of course, right? Just wanting to have good government. That came up with this absurd number that Justice Thomas accepted $4.3 million in gifts over 20 years, and compare it to the other justices who had done just $600,000 in the same span, with Justice Breyer only getting $15,000 in gifts. And when I looked at this chart, it was just so astonishingly dishonest with false information, and just it was seemingly designed just to attack Justice Thomas. And as bad as the left is at attacking him and smearing him, this one was just really, really astonishing. So what do? They count as a gift when the Thomases would go visit their friends, the Crows, Harlan Crow, his friend, up in their home in the Adirondacks, at their summer home. That is counted as a $280,950 gift, okay, for the Thomases. Okay, so there are these, the counting, and again, remember, the Judicial Conference in 2012 had said Justice Thomas does not need to report any of these gifts with his friends, because there had been a challenge to that back in 2012. They have an inconsistent standard, again, all to get Justice Thomas, of what counts as a gift for purposes of a trip. So Justice Thomas went to Dallas to give a speech, and I was there, an incredible speech on civil rights back in 2022. He disclosed it. It was an AEI event. So justices go and speak all the time at different events, schools, but also at things like this. And Harlan Crow, his friend, has a private plane, and he's an AEI trustee. He flew Justice Thomas down on his plane. Fix the Court counts it as a $68,000 gift. $68,333 to get down to the actual dollar. Whereas Stephen Breyer took 230 trips, including 7 over the same period of time, 17 funded by the Pritzker family, because he sits on something called the Pritzker Prize for Architecture. He was a judge on this thing. And they flew him to London and Paris and Beijing. None of those trips show up on the chart. They have a price tag of $500,000 for a vacation Justice Thomas took to Indonesia, as if he had chartered a boat and a plane by himself. A wildly inflated, crazy number, actually. Nobody does that. In fact, that's not what happened. Justice Thomas was with 15 other people on that trip. This is what Fix the Court does to come up with a crazy number and then, sort of the malign and attack Justice Thomas. Some of the information they rely on comes from ProPublica. And as I pointed out, ProPublica is filled with errors and misinformation in their stories about Justice Thomas, but it never stops. They ratchet it up during the springtime as the court gets to the end of its term to really go after the court, because they're worried about all these big decisions coming down that will go against the left, as it happened in with the Dobbs case in 22, the affirmative action case last year, and now some big cases coming up this year. But it just never ends, Vince, and it's just outrageous. But you have to push back against it. You have to show why it's full of lies and dishonest presentations, false information. It's just nonstop.
It sure is. Okay, let me ask some basic threshold questions. Has any of Harlan Crow, who's a friend of the Thomases and the left likes to target because he's wealthy and therefore has nice places for the Thomases to go visit, has Harlan Crow ever had business before the court that Justice Thomas ruled on that he shouldn't have?
He has never had, Harlan Crow nor his company, Crow Holdings, has ever had a case in all the time Justice Thomas has been on the Supreme Court, right? And one of the things that, Harlan Crow's been very open about, he's pro-choice. Okay. So here, on a big issue, Justice Thomas obviously was part of the Dobbs majority, and they are friends. They are Harlan Crow's a great patriot.
Uh-huh.
He's not as conservative as Justice Thomas. He has no business before the Supreme Court, and that's what's just so crazy here, right? Nobody cares that Justice Jackson, right, for 10 years had never disclosed her husband is a doctor, but he gets legal fees for consulting on medical malpractice cases. And guess what? For 10 years, she never disclosed that. She when she was nominated to the Supreme Court, she put it down like, oh yeah, I forgot to do that for several years over the past 10 years. She did it her first year on the district court when she went on the bench in 2012. Her first filing has her husband's clients down.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And she never again does it again. And then when she gets nominated to the Supreme Court, she says, I forgot to do it. But she doesn't tell us, what or where or when or what year. Nobody seems bothered by that. Those are cases, right? Those are that's litigation. And so here, Harlan Crow never had a case before the Supreme Court. So yes, to answer your question on that.
Okay, so here's another one for you. This organization, Fix the Court, the one that claims that Clarence Thomas is running afoul of all sorts of ethics obligations. Meanwhile, all the left-wing justices are as pure as the driven snow. Who is funding Fix the Court? I'm interested in that.
A lot of left-wing billionaires. There's forgetting his name. He's a guy who made up millions, maybe billions in the housing crisis back in 2008. So it's all left-wing groups, almost exclusively, that funds Fix the Court. Just like the left-wing sources, same donors actually that fund ProPublica. If you look at ProPublica's site, they don't do any oversight on the Biden administration. Fix the Court. Fix the Court. Here you go. Fix the Court likes to pretend, right? So they come up with this chart that covers all the justices, right? But they have this skewed way of counting that only smears Justice Thomas, okay? Mm-hmm. One of the examples they use is there was a scholarship that was set up. The Horatio Alger Association funds scholarships for disadvantaged kids who grew up under terrible circumstances. Mm-hmm. Justice Thomas is a member of it, and he speaks at that event every year. He spends time with the kids. There's always the scholarship kids who come up, and he spends time with them. The organization, to honor Justice Thomas, set up a scholarship in his son's name, Justice Thomas's son's name, at two high schools that Justice Thomas was his son had gone to school at one of them, Fork Union, and the other one is Randolph-Macon, where his great-nephew had gone. They set up a scholarship. None of the money went to any Thomas relative or any Thomas family member. Okay, it's $35,000. They count that as a gift to Justice Thomas on this chart. Okay. Meanwhile, Ruth Bader Ginsburg gets $1 million gift prize from the Burgoon Institute. And I actually helped uncover this, but she then, not that part, that was public. She gave out all that $1 million prize money to her favorite charities, made them swear that they would not release who got the money. Okay, so you still can't to this day find out who got it, but they don't count that as a prize for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Okay, that's the disconnect. So, why Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't have $1 million gift in her column, right? Her column, her number on this chart is $55,000, $14 and $14. $55,014 for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So they are skewing it in a way that's so dishonest to again just attack Justice Thomas, make him look like an outlier on this chart. They count up lots of people, right? We see President Obama, we see President Biden, accompanied by his son, Hunter Biden, going to basketball games, right? You see them sitting courtside. You see them sitting in suites. You saw Jill Biden sitting in the owner's box last year at the Super Bowl, right? Yep. For her beloved Philadelphia Eagles. Yes. Okay. Nothing is ever reported on the Biden's forms. No. Okay. Justice Thomas went to a University of Nebraska football game, right? Sat in a suite. As those suites work, the ticket price for each seat in there is assigned by the university. It's $65. but somehow ProPublica calculates it at $989.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so this is what they do. They play games with how they count the value of a gift.
Yeah.
Right. The Bidens have gone to all these billionaire homes. They're not their friends. They're their donors, like David Rubenstein up in Nantucket, a $31 million home. Right. The Bidens have stayed there repeatedly, and he's never disclosed it. Okay, it's not personal hospitality, which is exempted from being disclosed.
Yep.
That's not personal hospitality to say, I want to take over your house for a week with my clan and stay there for free. He does that all over the country, Biden. It's never been reported on in the media. The only group that the organization that has is the New York Post and me on my Twitter and some of my op-eds.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the dishonesty, the weaponization, the dishonest weaponization of ethics.
Yes.
To go after Justice Thomas and the other conservative justices like Justice Alito with this flag flying.
Yeah, and so Justice Thomas has been been an oversharer on the details here because he wants to do right, obviously. And I know that he's been a part of these new ethics standards that they're imposing at the court, so he can share even more information with the public now going forward in order to make sure nobody can even question his integrity. Meanwhile, I just pulled up the Influence Watch listing for Fix the Court, product of the Capitol Research Center, and they point out that Fix the Court is obviously a left-of-center judicial policy organization. It's a former project of the New Venture Fund, which itself is a part of Arabella Advisors. This is as left-wing as it gets. These are all these dark money left-wing billionaires funding these awful attacks on the right. They point out that the executive director of Fix the Court is a guy called Gabe Roth, who warned a reporter that he couldn't disclose their donors because, quote, if their names become public, they're never going to talk to me again and Fix the Court is over. So you have a group here that has anonymous left-wing billionaires funding it, designed to take down great American Supreme Court justices like Clarence Thomas, and then they have the temerity to claim that Justice Thomas isn't being fully forthcoming with all of his financial donors. The whole thing is so crazy.
You know, Vince, that's why I love coming on your show. You went right to the source. I wish I'd gone there with you. But there's other things on Gabe Roth. I think there's a complaint against him that based on the amount of money they've raised,
yes,
he's paid himself too much. I think he
was caught. They claim he was caught making false statements to the IRS on their financial disclosures and underreporting their revenues by at least $240,000.
Yes, and I also think there was something about lobbying where he was lobbying and he wasn't registering as a lobbyist. So here's the watchdog, right? Here's the watchdog who can't get his own house in order and funded by left-wing, and these groups like to say, oh, they don't control our work. These funders don't control our work. What are they investing in you for? What are they funding you for, right? Where are all your funders coming from? They're coming from the left. It's to attack the court. It's to attack these justices, in particular, my friend Justice Thomas, who they've been after for more than 30 years, since he showed up in Washington in the Reagan administration in 1981. But going after him, first bad piece was on in December of 1980. But it's just.
You know what should happen? You know what should happen? Harlan Crow should get in touch with this organization, Fix the Court, and be like, hey, I'm gonna cut you a big check, but I need you to investigate Ketanji Brown Jackson. Would you do that for me? Just let me know and see what happens. He's got the money. He can throw it around. All right, Mark Paoletta, thank you, sir. I appreciate the clarity on this topic as always. Really, really good to talk to you today, sir.